So Kevin Kinkead covers the 76ers for Crossing Broad, but he does a lot of other things for them. So he knows the bizarre nature of things that could happen with an organization being around the Sixers for a while. I'm wondering, though, if they have anything that matches up with the head coach coming out and saying, my two assistants will be back, and then firing them the very next day. So we'll get his take on all that, plus the Sixers tonight, what's going on there. There's been a wild week with the Sixers as well as they get ready for a team that owned them, and now they've kind of owned the last couple of games. They've beaten the Celtics 2 straight, and they'll play tonight at the Center. And, of course, you can hear that game right here on 97.3 ESPN as we bring in Kevin Kinkead from Crossing Broad on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. What's going on, Kevin?
What's up? That's a very appropriate song. It's always good to be on the Sports Bash with a fellow Mountaineer.
That's right, man. And we queued that one right up there for you. So you've been around the Sixers with all of their bizarre stuff that happens with them. Does this Eagle stuff even rank?
Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah, somewhere between the Markelle Fultz nonsense and Brian Colangelo burner game. Yeah, you could probably find room for it in there, sir.
Oh, man. All right, so let's get a couple quick thoughts on the Sixers getting ready for tonight. And this just the kind of week that it's been, because the fact that the Eagles were in the playoffs and then like the post-mortem, the Sixers kind of got swept under the rug, luckily for them, because you had Brett Brown kind of getting pressed on Ben Simmons and, I have failed him. And, it led to this lengthy explanation as to why he's calling more plays and all of this stuff. So kind of bring us up to speed. What has happened since the Eagles' season ended on Sunday?
Yeah, so, they went out, played against Oklahoma City, got a win at home, ended the losing streak, and kind of the big topic, that three-pointer question was kind of the topic before the game, but after the game and into the next day, the topic was more of, hey, they look a little different. They're running a lot of plays here. It looks slower in the half court. And we're looking at the box score, and we're seeing, there's only 10 turnovers here. And even if you go back during the losing streak, they had games where they only turned the ball over 11 times. They had 2 of those, even though they were losing. So Brett Brown then comes out on Tuesday and drops a really, really lengthy, spends 5 minutes answering 2 questions about how he's kind of changing things up offensively. Philosophically, he's a pace and space guy, and he wants to let free-flowing organic basketball develop. But it was sort of and not really an admission from him, but sort of an assertion that, this team is not really necessarily a fit for what he used to do. That was one of the biggest questions. I mean, you're a pace and space coach, and you gave him a team that was a bunch of 6'10" guys. So he's calling a lot more plays. He's calling 50 to 60, 70% more plays in a game. They're slowing it down. You see more sets, more horn stuff from them. They're using Ben Simmons as a roller. And all of that led to them being pretty good on Monday night. So go figure now Joel Embiid's going to be out with a dislocated finger. But you've seen a little bit of a different approach from Brett Brown. That's important.
So there was a lot of questions on that road trip about accountability and leadership, and where does that sit now? I mean, that comes out when you have a 4-game losing streak. Does it carry over after you win against Oklahoma City? Is that kind of out the window, or do you still think those questions remain?
No, because I think in a way, like, they're kind of macro level questions, aren't they? I mean, like, it's kind of a thing that's sort of it's not just about accountability when you lose. I mean, it's sort of a whole season long kind of thing. And I just think that goes back to the quirkiness of a roster where, all the new guys are the veterans and all of the old guys are the guys who've been around are 23 and 25 years old. I mean, like, you go around to any locker room in any sport and it'll be the exact opposite. Who are the leaders in the Eagles locker room? Jason Kelsey, 29 or 30 or whatever he is now. Malcolm Jenkins is going to be 32, 33. Guys like Chris Long, even last year before he retired. Like, it's just kind of strange how you have a guy like Al Horford. You talk about he comes in and gives advice to people, you can lean on him, but he's also brand new. It's a new situation. I'm not, if I started working at 97.3 ESPN, I wouldn't walk in there on day one and tell Mike Gill and Eitan and Harry what to do. I mean, there's sort of like a feeling out process here, but I think it's just a combination of young guys having been there the longest, a lot of turnover, and, guys in Ben and Joel who prefer, I think, to do their talking on the court versus in the locker room.
Kevin, there's been a lot of stories and controversy and concerns surrounding the 76ers, but you mentioned Brett now is running more plays. He's taking the ball out of Ben's hands. So I want to ask you about that. Is that concerning to you? Because I don't know if there's. Did we lose him?
We just lost him. He just went blank.
I guess it was concerning.
There he is.
Very concerning.
I like how he's calling the call-in number, though, not the hotline number.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll get Kevin right back on here. Go ahead and continue.
All right, Kevin.
Yeah, what was the last thing you heard me say, Mike?
I think you finished what you were
Nothing.
saying. Ryan was asking you a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Well, it sounded like you were like computer. It sounded like I was like, talking to you through a computer or something like that. I know I'm like kind of fighting a cold here, but I knew I didn't sound that bad.
All right, so I don't know what you missed, but what I'm asking you is, you mentioned Brett Brown has been taking the ball out of Ben's hands, and I like that. It's something different. He's using the pick and roll a little bit more with Josh Richardson, but is that concerning to you? Because for me, it's a good short-term solution. It's a good thing to throw into the mix, but I don't want the answer for this team's problems being, let's take the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands. That's not really a good sign moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have a guy like Ben Simmons as a roller, but he's not a shooter, then defense is going to adjust and kind of game plan for that. You could just go under every single screen and let Josh Richardson shoot a three-pointer every time. I mean, he's a decent three-point shooter, but he's not like a 38% three-point shooter. I think he's down around like 35 this year. So you try to do it that way. Brett doesn't like pick-and-roll basketball. I mean, because three other guys are standing around on the court. Pick-and-roll basketball, honestly, is kind of boring. I mean, I've always kind of liked the fact that the Sixers try to play a different way. I've always tried to play more closer to the Warriors than other teams. But it is kind of disconcerting the fact that you're thinking, well, he's your point guard and you're trying to take the ball out of his hands. But when you have a lot of guys who want the ball, and you could justify a decent amount of usage for all of them. I mean, that's just sort of how it has to go. They're running some quick hit horn stuff, some double staggers for Josh Richardson the other day. You can find a way, I think, to blend that all together, and Ben will still get enough of the ball in those transition sequences and some of the other stuff that they run where he can be involved necessarily kind of like as a roller and off ball kind of guy.
Another big story as of late is Al Horford and his acclimation to the team and the offense and how he's being used. And it's not been pretty. Really anything with this team hasn't been pretty on offense as we've expected. But what do you see with Al Horford and how do they fix it? Because he's not just a spot up and shoot threes type of guy. He does that well for the position, but that's when he's really a focal point in an offense in the half court set, and they haven't been doing that.
Well, I think the last time I was on with you guys, I think last week or whatever, we were talking a little bit more about using him as a roller also, and kind of having him pop, and hit that little elbow jumper and whatnot. And so you kind of have the same conundrum here. Look, if you're using Ben Simmons as a roller, then Al Horford's standing in the corner. And if you're using Al Horford as a roller, then Ben Simmons is standing in the corner or standing in the dunker spot or something like that. So it's kind of, again, that's just kind of a construction of redundancy in the way that the roster is built. Interestingly enough, with Embiid not playing tonight, we'll see if Brett Brown decides to play Al Horford at center instead of doing the Kyle O'Quinn and Al Horford at the fourth game that we saw in Indiana on New Year's Eve, because I don't think that worked. And maybe you'll see some examples tonight of how that might be able to work a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know how you can really arrange it without just having one person standing around. I mean, that was the thing when you had like Dario Saric and Ersan Ilyasova playing power forward, is that they were fine with just standing in the corner and taking a catch and shoot 3-pointer. But Al Horford is not. He's not been a good enough shooter to be able to justify doing that with him, nor would you pay somebody that much money to do that anyway.
So, Kevin, obviously there are reports out there or innuendo, one involving Robert Covington coming back, one involving a potential Ben Simmons for D'Angelo
That time
Russell.
of the year, boys.
What would it look like? I'm kind of tired of the team getting blown up. I do think a bench weapon at the deadline would be nice, but I don't think it's good for this team to have another identity in the middle of the year. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
you blew it up twice last year. I mean, how many times did we talk about what was the cliche that we were throwing? What was the line we were throwing out there? Brett Brown has coached 3 different teams this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're trying to do the opposite of that. And like just real quick on the D'Angelo Russell thing, like that doesn't make a ton of sense to me because number one, Ben Simmons and Draymond Green, there's no way that they would be able to play together.
Right.
You know, they're the same exact player. D'Angelo Russell is a high volume. He shoots like 18, 19 shots a game, and he's running almost as many pick and rolls as anybody in the league. So Brett Brown is what now, a pick and roll coach? You could have anybody do that. I mean, I don't think Ben Simmons would ever be traded unless Brett Brown was fired, because I think those guys are kind of like attached intrinsically, whether we like it or not. And like with Covington, you already have him in Matisse Thybulle. I mean, you have a cheaper Robert Covington and Matisse Thybulle, who's just a catch and shoot 3-and-D kind of guy. He's a cheaper, younger, more raw Robert Covington right now. So that also seems redundant to me.
Right.
I think Malik Beasley, out of all those names that appeared in that article, I think it was Kevin O'Connor in the Ringer. Out of all those names that popped up there, Malik Beasley would make more sense. E'Twaun Moore. You have guys who are like smaller, bona fide shooting guards who can catch and shoot and who can hunt a corner, but they can also take you off the ball and do some things that you were hoping that Markelle Fultz was going to be able to do. I mean, that's why Trey Burke is playing as many minutes as he is right now, because that's the one element that's missing in the half court, is just somebody to put the ball on the floor, dribble, get to the rack, shoot the occasional three-pointer. You probably see as much of Trey as possible until they make that trade. But if they do make a trade, it'll be kind of like I think you're right, Mo. She'll be kind of like a bench piece, like a sixth or a seventh kind of guy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you think that, Ben and Brett are kind of inextricably tied, because I've wondered for a while now, we've talked about it on the show, certain coaches are known to coach with certain styles, and I don't know what coach out there you associate with the type of makeup that the Sixers have. They're very unique. So I always wondered if they were to move on from Brett, if they don't fulfill expectations this year and bring in a new coach, it's not like, hey, I've got great guards, let's go get Mike D'Antoni. It's like I don't know whose style this fits.
No, it doesn't. And I'll give you an example, like, the sexy pick to replace Brett Brown. All the people who want to fire Brett Brown, the first name that comes up is always Jay Wright,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Jay Wright ain't walking in the door and playing 4 out, 1 in with the way that the roster is constructed. He's going to run into the same. Listen, Jay Wright's a fantastic coach. I love Jay Wright, but him or anybody, with John Wooden reincarnated, could walk through the door and he's going to have the same issues with fit that Brett Brown has. So I don't know if somebody's coming in here. I don't know what they're telling Ben Simmons. Okay, we're going to play you as a power forward. We're going to replicate the Draymond role, or we're going to get rid of Joel Embiid and we're going to build around you, and we're going to do a Giannis kind of thing. You know what I mean? So Brett Brown's way of trying to get around it was to play motion offense, was to play A to B motion offense with a lot of handoffs and a lot of passing and a lot of ball movement and stuff like that. And if Joel Embiid has to stand out there and shoot a couple 3-pointers a game, so be it. But I don't know what that person is. I feel like if they would make a coaching change, I think that one of Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid would also go along with that, because you're still inheriting the same problems that Brett had.
Do you feel like the Horford deal was kind of with Milwaukee in mind? Like, let's put this team together and try to take Milwaukee out, and we'll just be talented enough to get through the other teams in a 7-game series. But we're going to put a roster together for this run to try to take Giannis out, essentially. Is that the way they thought when they built this team?
Yeah, I think so, because it's like now, you don't have to link Joel Embiid's minutes to Giannis's minutes in a playoff series. You can give him a little bit of a rest, and Horford can go in there. Which
by the way, Kevin, causes them to look clunky and struggle against other teams who don't play Milwaukee style.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we kind of mentioned this the last time. Like, they are built for the playoffs. Like, if they're built for anything, it's like beating Milwaukee and beating Boston with, addition by subtraction. Now you don't have to play against Al Horford because he's on your team. So now you're kind of built.
It's a lot of money to subtract somebody.
It is, yeah. But I think I think you're right about the Milwaukee thing, and you see what happened there. But again, I think, if you wanted to look at glass half full, it's just that, they are built as a playoff team. And the problem is they have trouble getting up for, a second night of a back-to-back on a Friday in December or something. But I'm intrigued, I think, to see what happens tonight without Embiid on there and what he does with Horford, because Embiid, you could have taped up the finger and you could have said, all right, we're going to play with it or whatever. But I mean, look, you got enough time here that you're not. All these ice hockey people coming out here and saying, "Well, Patrick Kane would have got hit in the head and gone out and played with 2 teeth or something." Okay, well, it's not the playoffs, and Embiid would be playing right now if it was the playoffs. But you're going to try to get him healthy, see what's up with the finger, and hopefully play Al Horford at the 5 tonight and see if that opens up anything for him.
Is it that simple in your mind that this team is built for the playoffs? Because that's what I'm going back and forth with myself. I understand. I knew going into this year they were not at their best. This team is not going to look good offensively. So when they're struggling, it's going to be basically an absolute disaster. But I just keep thinking, yeah, they're going to be better in the playoffs defensively, and they're going to cause a lot of havoc. But it's also going to be tougher for them on the offensive end in the playoffs. So are you concerned at all with this team moving forward, or is it as simple as it's tough for them to bring energy night in, night out, and they're still working things out?
I think I'm less concerned now that I see an admission from Brett Brown to say that he's going to play, he's going to slow it down in the half court and that they're going to call more plays because, if you think about it, that is exactly what fourth quarter playoff basketball is. Like, the problem with pace and space for Brett Brown is that when you got to the playoffs, that is not what playoff basketball is. It's not pace and space. Teams are getting back in transition. You're not getting cheap buckets. They're trying harder defensively. You're not going to be flying up and down the court like you are against the Charlotte Hornets 4 times in November, So start instilling some of those principles now. I mean, Brett was pretty good in the Toronto series last year. In the Brooklyn series, you could point to examples at the end of games. Like, I remember in Game 4, they ran the same damn play 3 times in a row, and they scored twice on it. So he has that in him, and I think more of what he does not want to do is more of what playoff basketball is. So in a way, his stubbornness and wanting to play a certain way and wanting to play fun and play free and play open, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily interface with what you have to get to. So I would say I'm a little bit more glass half full when it comes to how they're playing now and how they're built and what they're going to get to. The issue then is just like stumbling into the playoffs as the 3 seed again, because then you're doing it on the road. So.
Yeah, but real quick, somebody just put out, was it Tim Bontemps, about they have the 5th easiest schedule the rest of the way, so they should be able to make them start piling up and making a move here. And if they don't, and they finish as the 5th or 6th, that's when you might say, all right, I'm a little bit more concerned.
Speaking of that, Kev.
Yeah, and and listen, they like a week ago or something, they were like 23-14 or it was something like that, and that record was the same exact record they had the same exact time last year. And then they went on like a 7-2 run or something like that in the early part of January, and then they start to space themselves out a little bit. I mean, the reason they finished with 51 wins, if you think about it, is because they got a little sloppy towards the end there, and they had the 3-game losing streak, and that's what held them technically from having a better year than they did the year before. But they'll start to string together stuff, and they'll start to stack wins, I think. Like, I honestly think, and Brett Brown admitted this, that they were just kind of cruising and looking ahead to the playoffs, which is not necessarily a bad thing because that they're a little focused on that, and that's what they want. But I mean, you can't go from point A to point D. You got to go to point B and C along the way.
Hey, speaking of that though, do you get any sense from the higher ups or ownership, management, and anything at all, Kev, that maybe they're not thrilled with how the start has gone, or are they just kind of like waiting? Yeah,
I think they're waiting. I don't think you would bring Brett Brown back for another year and rehaul the entire roster again, for the 3rd time in 1 year, with the idea that you're going to pull the plug now. I think that Brett Brown is certainly, by virtue of what the process was and the years that were forfeited, while he had to coach a bunch of guys who were supposed to lose on purpose, I think that does generally afford him more time to do what he's trying to do here. But you could certainly make a justification to make a change at the end of this year. But I just don't. Again, it goes back to I know some people push back against the idea of like, well, if you get rid of him, who are you going to bring in? And sometimes it doesn't really matter because you just need a different voice, somebody different, like a change of pace. I mean, like, Andy Reid at the end of his tenure, you just needed something different at that point, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think they would have brought Brett back in the mindset of, okay, he's coaching a new team again, but we're going to give him a short leash. Like, I think it would probably be a full year, and then you'd hear from Josh Harris then, because he doesn't, he's more like Jeffrey Lurie. He doesn't, and less of Jerry Jones. He's definitely not speaking after every game.
All right, Kevin Kinkead, of course, Sixers tonight. They take on the Celtics, and you can hear that game right here on 97.3 ESPN. No Joel Embiid. Matisse Thybulle's back, and we'll see how it all works out. Sixers have played well against the Celtics this year, including an opening night win at the Wells Fargo Center. I'll see you tonight, Kev.
All right, I will try to make it down there, and if you don't see me down there, it's because I'm at home with a sick kid. But we're gonna make we're gonna make an effort.